Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to explain how to do a correlation coefficient, so our Pearson correlation. We learned this in class, but I'm just going to give a refresher in case anyone needs a refresher on this. So for a correlation, what we're doing is looking at whether two variables are associated with or correlated with one another. So if we're more stressed, are we also going to have a lower GPA, so perform less well academically? If we have more alcohol, will we perform worse academically? So those two things, like we would look at like alcohol use and GPA would be something we could correlate together. So any two variables that might be related to one another, we would do a Pearson correlation to look at that. So I'm using example data from one of my groups from the first project because it had two variables that we could look at a correlation between. So these both need to be scale variables, or at least like interval ratio at the very least. And that's so that we can get like an average for each of them to like when we're doing the correlation. So they can't really be categorical because we can't correlate that with anything. So like higher scores wouldn't reflect more of something with categorical data. So in order to do a correlation, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more what everything means as we do it, we're going to go to the Analyses tab, and then we're going to click on Regression here and Correlation Matrix. So only one window comes up here. So we're going to put both variables in this window. So for this example, for this study, they looked at sleep quality, which is this scale called the PSKI. And these were all of the different components of the scale. And then they also looked at stress, and these were all the questions on that scale. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, I think, and take the composite scores for each one. So this was like the average score or the sum score for both of these scales. So we're going to be correlating, seeing whether these two are correlated with each other. So sleep quality and stress. So we'll drag them over to the window. We're going to check off flag significant correlations, N, and we're also going to check off correlation matrix. So this is all we'll need for this class. So the first thing we have here is our correlation matrix. So the way that this works, and I should mention that for the PSKI, higher scores reflect worse sleep, and for the perceived stress scale, higher scores reflect more stress. So this one's kind of not as intuitive because higher scores, it might sound like higher scores are better sleep, but higher scores are worse sleep. So we have both variables like on the columns and on the rows here. So what we're doing is basically comparing or seeing whether there's an association between those two variables. So this one is blank because it's the same thing as this here. So it would just be repeating that twice, which isn't really useful for us. So it only shows up once, which is helpful. And these ones have little lines through them because if they were comparing them, they're comparing to themselves. So this one would be comparing the perceived stress scale with the perceived stress scale, which obviously isn't possible to do because we're not, they would just be the same thing. And same thing for this one, sleep PSKI scale with the PSKI scale. So those just show up as lines because we know that we can't look at a correlation between that because it's only one variable. And this one is our PSKI scale and our perceived stress scale. So looking at this, first we have our N value here, which is 101, which just means that we had 101 participants. Our p-value, like always, we want a p-value of below 0.05 to indicate that it's statistically significant. And we do have a p-value of less than 0.001, so we know that there is a significant correlation here. And then looking at the actual correlation, which is the Pearson's R, we have a 0.462, which would be categorized as a moderate correlation. And this information is in the week 5 PowerPoint presentation if you want to look at it. But basically, just a refresher, the correlation coefficient can range from a 0 to 1, and this can be a positive or negative number. So it could be like negative 0.462, it could be positive 0.462, it can be a negative or positive number. And a weak correlation is anything less than a 0.3. So whether it's a negative 0.3 or a positive 0.3, anything below that would be considered weak. Anything between a 0.3 and a 0.59 would be considered moderate. So this falls between a 3 and a 0.59. So we know it's a moderate correlation. And anything above a 0.6 would be a strong correlation. And the highest it can be is 1, obviously, since scores range from 0 to 1. So a perfect correlation between two variables would be if it was a 1, which almost never happens. So that's why we say above a 0.6 is considered strong. So we have our moderate correlation here. I'll just show you the plot. So this plot, as you can see, kind of looks weird, like our variable names are not showing up where they should show up. So I'm going to show you a better way to do this to get our plot here so that we can look at this correlation. So if you click, once again, in Analyses, on Exploration, and then you click Scatter Plot, what we can do is we're going to put perceived stress on our y-axis and the PSKI sleep score on our x-axis. We're going to click on regression line, and we're going to click on standard error, which just adds that blue like highlighting here. So this is just a better way to view it than this one. Obviously, you can tell why. So what we're seeing here is like on the y-axis, we have our perceived stress. So higher scores are more stress. And on our PSKI, we have sleep quality, and higher scores are worse sleep quality. So as we're seeing here, as people get more stressed, their sleep quality gets worse. So we're seeing that there is that moderate correlation here based on the slope of this line. If the line were more steep, we could say that it was a strong correlation, and if it was flat, we would know that there was no correlation. But we have a moderate strength correlation here. So that is how you do a correlation in JAMOVI. I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. All right, take care.